The purpose of today's discussion with the presidency is quite simple, because it pertains to two aspects that the committee deals with on a regular basis, as we take the Auditor General's reports and reports from the SIU and so on, and that is the follow-up actions on the SIU's reports to the presidency, because that the president issues the proclamations that authorize the SIU. And therefore we look up to the president to follow up on his or her own reports. In this case, it is a he, and then make sure that the remedial actions that are proposed therein are implemented. The second pertains to the bane of all of our lives, and that is the vetting of officials, which has been an issue for quite some time. So we're here to discuss both. As the committee will know, I'm in a constant battle to make sure that the presentations are concise, so that we can get to a conversation as quickly as possible. So the members have been furnished with longer versions of what we're going to be discussing today. I've asked the presidency to, in this presentation, to really get straight to the point in terms of the issues that we want to discuss, so that, especially given that we're starting at 10, we have as much time as possible for the actual discussion. So I see that the sort of the shortened version was sent to the team shortly. Thank you very much for that. But Honorable Deputy Minister, I'll hand over to you. The Minister sent me a letter, I'm sure you'll deal with that, sent me a letter and called me some weeks ago to say that she has a commitment today, but called me this morning to remind me of the apology. But if you can deal with that as well. But over to you. Thanks.
No, thank you very much, Chairperson. Good morning to yourself and good morning to members of the Standing Committee on Public Accounts. Let me firstly preface my remarks by amplifying on the apology of the Minister. The Minister would have been available on your last request to appear before the committee. However, there was a change of date and she's consequently unable to come here. And the reason thereof is that there is a sitting of the economic cluster, which is a precursor to the sitting of cabinet convened tomorrow, which will solely discuss the state of the South African economy. We apologize because the Minister would have preferred to be here in person and interact with the work of the committee. But she unfortunately is unable to be here because, as you know, the Constitution enjoins the President to direct the work of the executive branch. And because of the magnitude of the matters that are related to the economy, the Minister has had to join this cluster, and that is why I'm here on her behalf and on behalf of the Presidency. The second matter which I would like to bring to the attention of the committee is that this is the second appearance that we're making as part of the fulfillment of our constitutional duty to account to Parliament. And since our last appearance, the SIU has launched 14 investigation reports. The committee should be made aware of the fact that I am joined today by the head of SIU, Advocate Mutibi, and the representatives of SIU who are part of the management who are with us today, led by Advocate Mutibi. We are also joined by the COO in the Presidency, Rory Galosha, and Jonathan Tim, who is also from the President. The Presidency, they will elucidate and expound on the report together with the SIU. We will speak about the work that has been undertaken since our last interaction here to really track the implementation of the SIU reports. Two, as you correctly said, we will also delve into matters that are related to vetting. Let me indicate, Chair, that whilst vetting is the province of the State Security Agency, it undertakes this responsibility on behalf of the Department of Public Service and Administration. And you would know that the Intelligence Services Oversight Act enjoins the SSA to report to the Joint Committee on Intelligence on its work, its operations, including on matters that are related to financial management. So we wish to also take this opportunity to amplify the ask that was initially made by the minister that whilst we are going to speak to the report, we would implore on SCOPA to also request or summon GPSA to give a better context on the work of vetting and on the interventions that have been made since our last appearance in this committee. But we look forward to constructive engagements with the Standing Committee. We are ready to engage on any matter that should arise in this meeting. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I thought someone is going to take us through the... You've sent us a slide presentation. Is it okay?
Yes.
Oh, sorry. Honorable Skosan.
Good morning, Chair, and good morning to the Deputy Minister and Advocate Motibi and our colleagues. I just want to make it on record once again, Chair, that the...
Sorry, Honorable Isaac, you are free to take the call outside. Thank you.
Yeah, that the issue of sent by the President, you know, we've been on SCOPA a week ago. Deputy Minister, this is not directed to you, it's directed to government, that we are being taken for granted, Chair. I mean, all the ministers, not necessarily all, but most of them, there's always an apology. There's always an apology. We went to Gauteng, you know, with the municipalities. It was a shame. But I'm just saying this, please, let them prioritize us as well. We are not asking too much. I mean, this date was set long ago as well. I know, you know, they'll say, no, maybe the other committees are more important than this. But I thought that SCOPA as well is one of the most important committee in Parliament. I thank you, Chair.
Thanks very much, Honorable Skosana. The point is noted. So we changed the date this time, unfortunately. So the minister had indicated she's coming. We changed our program as the committee, and that's what caused the misalignment in this particular case. I take the message in relation to ministers in general, but this time I consulted with the Secretariat and we changed the date for our own arrangements, and that's what created the situation. Thanks very much. Over to you, Deputy Minister.
Thank you, Chair. I'm going to request that we take note of your comments, Honorable Skosana. I'm going to request that Jonathan Tim leads the presentation on behalf of the Presidency. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Deputy Minister, and good morning to the Chairperson and the members of the Standing Committee. I am going to make a presentation as indicated by the chair to the point. The focus is two parts. The first really looks at the ongoing engagement and a latest update in the ongoing engagement with the committee on the updates and processing of investigation reports from the SIU, and then a high-level look at the challenges and plan to address these for vetting of officials. Just by way of context, we met with the committee. Just by way of context, we met with the committee. Chairperson indicated that indicated an intention to establish a regular biannual engagement with the presidency, with the minister in the presidency, to focus on systemic issues affecting governance and accountability in the use of public resources. I think, if I recall correctly, Chair, you'd spoken about a single point of accountability. So, and this for us reflected a shift in Scopa's focus from the focus on specific investigations and systems to a more structural and systemic view on institutional weaknesses in the state. The chair did indicate that Scopa was embarking on a strategic planning process and would communicate this approach to the presidency. So while the committee chair did outline a number of potential areas of exploration, all of which were really very important, we are still awaiting the formal communication from the committee with regard to this ongoing engagement so that we can really structure ourselves. I think the presidency welcomes this approach, and we will respond to that when we receive the request from the committee. So that's just by way of context and background.
No, thank you very much, and thanks for raising that. So we are submitting the committee's strategy this in a day or two to the Speaker's office. There is a meeting of committee chairs tomorrow, so you should be getting that shortly. So we've gone through Parliament's own strategy. We've sharpened our areas of focus last week when we had our own stretch session. So the outcome of that, in terms of the areas we're focusing on, will be communicated to you, the presidency that is, so that you know what the committee is focusing on. And then we can talk about how we interact on a regular basis to drive outcomes in those areas. But thanks very much for the reminder so that we can then share.
Thank you, Chairperson. So now we move to an update on the...
Then share.
Thank you, Chairperson. So now we move to an update on the... I would just like to outline the context in which this work takes place. The 7th administration makes an explicit commitment around anti-corruption reforms as a core priority of the 7th administration. The medium-term development plan sets this out. This plan has 3 priorities, and the capable and ethical developmental state is one of these 3. It's the other 2 priorities: inclusive growth, jobs, and reducing poverty. And the presidency coordinates a number of areas of work around this anti-corruption value chain. At the strategy level, the presidency is responsible for coordination and oversight of the National Anti-Corruption Strategy 2020 to 2030. As part of that, the presidency has been supporting the National Anti-Corruption Advisory Council, the NACAC, which has just in the last month completed its term, 3-year term, and submitted its final report to the President on the 28th of August. That document is publicly available on the presidency website. Then at a subordinate level to the National Anti-Corruption Strategy, but taking forward a number of the reform areas, is the work around implementation, coordination and monitoring of the President's response to the State Capture Commission. The 60 actions contained in the President's response are an important vehicle that the Presidency is using to drive the broader reform program. And then at a very granular and systems level, and I think thanks in a large part to the interest that SCOPA has had in this, we have a focus on strengthening systems and oversight around implementation of the recommendations of the Special Investigating Unit. There's also the work around executive ethics and integrity management and other projects such as the Joint Initiative on Crime and Corruption, which is a partnership between Business South Africa and the Presidency, looking at this point, specifically capacitating law enforcement agencies around digital capabilities, forensic investigations. So that's the context in which the work that we are doing. And then more specifically, to zoom in on the work of the President and in regard to the work of the SIU, I'm sure this background is well known, but the SIU is established by presidential proclamation. Work of the SIU, I'm sure this background is well known, but the SIU is established by presidential proclamation, Investigating Units and Special Tribunals Act. And the President, in terms of the Act, confers the investigative powers to the SIU by gazetting proclamations with specific terms and scope based on motivations submitted by the SIU and processed through the Minister of Justice. So, and then at the tail end, the President receives investigating reports, which include the recommendations, and coordinates with the responsible authorities tracking and monitoring outcomes. And that's what we're going to be focusing on in this part of the presentation. I would just like to indicate that in the previous report we brought to SCOPA, we had provided some high-level statistics around progress on criminal cases under the PPE or the COVID-19 procurement investigation. We had, if the committee recalls, taken that as a subset of recommendations. It was the biggest investigation done as a way to build this tracking capability. So it was a sample of recommendations. In this presentation, we don't include reporting on criminal investigations, and there are various reasons for that. The first being of prosecutorial and law enforcement independence. So the Presidency is not tracking at the level of cases or recommendations any criminal matters. Those are referred directly to the NPA. And in terms of the system capability that we are building, the Presidency does not have access to case information, only statistical information. The level of maturity of the new system is not at the level where we are able to get the statistics on the prosecution or the progress of criminal referrals at this point. But we would, I'm sure at the next engagement, be able to give you the statistics on the flow of these referrals from the SIU through the various stages of the law enforcement and investigative and prosecutorial process. So I can talk, if the committee is interested, and my colleagues from SIU can talk about that specific capability that we're building, but this presentation focuses on the disciplinary and administrative recommendations that we are tracking currently. So moving to the work that's happened, the developments since we last addressed the committee. There have been 33 proclamations gazetted, authorized by the President since we last engaged with the committee, and this brings the total to 309 proclamations issued since 2001. And just to note that the President is really leveraging this tool available for the fight against corruption, having issued over 55% of all proclamations issued since taking office. And then the charts on the right-hand side just give an indication of the numbers and how the proclamations have been issued, noting that in the 7th administration we have issued 55 proclamations, and we quite early on in the term. Then moving to the investigation reports received by the Presidency. The Presidency has issued 14 investigation reports to the affected organs of state since November. And in the two tables that appear in the presentation, we provide some high-level details in terms of the organ of state affected and the high-level status of the recommendations from these different organs of state. So if the committee wants to delve into any of these, we can do so, but I'm just going to move on. This slide, Chair, is one that I think will interest the committee and provoke some discussion. In the tracking of the recommendations, we are able to detect trends and functionalities. The area that we are focusing on currently, disciplinary and administrative. There are systemic recommendations issued by the SIU. We do at the system that we are building. We are not tracking systemic yet. We have not uploaded into our system, but we have 1,278 individuals flagged for disciplinary action by the SIU in the Presidency tracking system that we have reported on over the last few years. Of those, we record 370 as finalized, 608 are in progress, and there are 300 individuals about which we are still awaiting information in terms of the progress from the organs of state. In terms of the finalized, 370 finalized individuals, we record 44 dismissals from the public service. There are several more that have been found guilty and subjected to less severe forms of sanction, such as demotion, suspension without pay, written warnings. But here we just record the seniority of some of the officials that have been dismissed as a result of the SIU work. That includes an acting head of department, 3 municipal managers, 3 directors, deputy directors general in acting positions, 12 chief directors, and 4 CFOs, one of whom was acting. We also record 55 resignations of officials. And this is brought here as well because this is a challenge in terms of that we are seeking to address through a number of, or a couple of different interventions to ensure that the charges and cases follow those officials should they return to the public administration in any part of the public administration. In terms of debarring or restricting of companies or individuals doing business with the state, we have 467 individuals and companies that have been recommended by the SIU to be added to the National Treasury's Restricted Suppliers Register. There is currently only one company on both lists. In other words, only one of the 476 individuals and companies have been restricted. We will talk a little bit more in the next slide about thing that is not adequate. This slide, Chairperson and members of the committee, looks at what the recommendations are telling us about where systems are working and where systems are failing. The granular tracking of these recommendations does give the Presidency a very useful view into the functioning of administrative systems that are necessary for accountability. So we note here the supplier restrictions as a to the requests from the Presidency for information on the status of disciplinary processes. We also noted the resignations before the conclusion as an area of concern. But we are able to access different data sets to do checks and comparisons. So, for example, the PERSAL data set does give us a sight of where matters have been acted on, but the Presidency hasn't received communication. So some of what we're seeing in these numbers is a lack of communication, not a lack of action. But as our system expands and matures, we will close down that gap. So in terms of strategic interventions to address these, we have the digital coordinating and monitoring mechanism, and that project is a joint project between Presidency, SIU, the State Information Technology Agency, and the NPA currently. We will be bringing on board other organs of state, such as Department of Justice, DPSA, etc. We did have a discussion with the Auditor General as well, to monitor the recommendations end-to-end and identify and resolve performance challenges. It's an ongoing project. It is building capability, I think, in a way that will deliver a legacy and important lessons going forward. There is also the Central Register project that has been reported here to track dismissals and resignations with cases pending across the slide states across the public service, but in fact it is across the public administration. The Minister of Public Service and Administration is at the moment working on regulations under the Palmer Act to provide a regulatory environment for this, but it is up and running on the DPSA's website, being able to check whether somebody who's listed, not somebody, but it's an ID number listed against a dismissing organ of state, and one can check whether an ID number matches a dismissal or a resignation. Then in terms of the disbarment of companies, the Public Procurement Act introduces an enforceable national framework for debarring suppliers, as well as the transparency components. As the committee will know, the current legal framework puts the responsibility for debarring at the level of accounting officers, with all the requirements for due process. But it's at the discretion of the accounting officer, and there are no currently levers to act where accounting officers themselves do not act. The Public Procurement Act did include a provision when it went to the legislature to give National Treasury the authority to debar in cases where accounting officers were not taking action, but that didn't make it through to the Act. National Treasury are looking at regulations, which they had indicated they will publish for public comment next month, around how to address this. The Act itself does, however, improve the situation because it provides specific instances where an accounting officer must act. We also, in terms of broader ability to detect and hold accountable, the digital forensic capabilities that are being expanded across different key agencies, from law enforcement, Hawks, NPA, but also to CIPC. So we are seeing a lot of opportunity, this kind of digital accountability, digital tracking work that we're doing specifically with the SIU recommendations has implications for a number of different sources of data and sources of accountability that do not, in many instances, leverage the full digital capabilities to detect and to hold accountable. Similarly, the structures are also maturing. The Fusion Center is a permanent structure within the FIC. There's a structure, the Integrated Task Force, to bring together all of the implementing law enforcement agencies around the state capture cases. Similarly, the review of the anti-corruption architecture, including overhaul of whistleblower protections, as really explored in depth in the NACAC report and recommendations, which are on their way to, in a process of being considered by the executive on their way to cabinet, will really address some of these gaps, as well as legal reforms such as the establishment of a permanent investigating directorate, which brings together prosecutions and investigators, the national intelligence reforms, a whole swathe of anti-money laundering legislation that has come in, as well as public administration amendments. Chair, I'll now move to the second part of the presentation, looking at the vettings of officials, and we'll deal with challenges contributing to the delays, actions to address these. So the legislation empowers or mandates the State Security Agency to conduct vetting, investigations of applicants who are employed or applying to an organ of state or have an intention to render services that may give them access to classified information, intelligence in the possession of organs of state. It's worth noting that there are different levels of vetting. Departments themselves undertake preliminary vetting, and then the state security does a much deeper dive.
Technology is going to be the end of us. It's going to finish us.
Thank you, Chairperson. So, in pursuit of the mandate, the State Security Agency has reported some challenges that contribute to delays in vetting of officials. And these are some of the most prominent challenges. non-compliance by vetting subjects, subjects not submitting required documents, mostly financial statements, subjects not submitting vetting forms, subjects not honoring or postponing appointments, mostly the polygraph test. Continuing, provisions of references that are not easily accessible, and they give examples of president or ministers. It becomes difficult to secure interviews as references. Capacity and budget within vetting fieldwork units, long turnaround time for fingerprints from the South African Police Services Criminal Records Centre, non-compliance by references of vetting subjects, references not honouring or postponing or cancelling appointments for interviews, unavailability. So in terms of an action plan, the SSA has developed and taken note of this challenge and responded to it through a number of different interventions. So we'll just touch on some of these issues related to the action plan in terms of the National Intelligence Priority Strategy. This work is unfamiliar to me, Chair, so please accept my apologies for the acronyms. So the action plan that a state security agency has 5 pillars that informs the improved vetting posture.
Sorry, there's something called NIPs there. When I was growing up, a NIP was the smaller, of your spirits. You had a nip, you had a half, and then you had a straight. Then you had a straight. So I hope that's not the nip that you are referring to there.
Chair, I think the new word is a cellular.
Is it a cellular?
Or an older new name. Thank you, Chair. So in terms of progress on implementation, there are primary and secondary priority departments and state-owned enterprises. So I think the State Security Agency is focusing its efforts where the highest priority is, given the huge load of vetting. And the priority positions that have been prioritized are executive management, supply chain management, security, ICT, and specialized positions. So I think recognizing as I said, the huge number of applications that the State Security Agency received. So organs of state are also conducting their own pre-employment screenings as per instruction of the Minister, and a letter to that effect has been distributed by the organs of state. There's the development and implementation of an e-vetting system. The State Security Agency, in collaboration with the CSIR, are developing an e-vetting system. An implementation of that system will drastically improve turnaround times for vetting. The acting DG of State Security has issued a directive in 2022 to state-owned enterprises to establish vetting field units by 2025. The State Security Agency is assisting SOEs with guidelines and memorandum of understanding. SSA has employed graduates to digitize all vetting files. Digitization will improve retrieval and turnaround times for re-vetting purposes. Accounting officers at agency and departmental level are responsible for ensuring that vetting for staff at a more junior level is executed. Chairperson, that is the presentation. I conclude here. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. Let me remind you that I'm trying to respond to what Jonathan said earlier, that we had alluded to the fact that the vetting process is the exclusive domain of SSA, conducted on behalf of DPSA, and that's why he struggles with acronyms and so on. So
let's ask them about the NIP.
We will ask them about the NIP. And so we regurgitate the ask that we made earlier that we think DPSA will be able to give a much bigger detail on these issues. I don't know if you have expectations that the SIU must make remarks on the report or not.
No, not at this stage. If there are questions the members have that require the SIU's response, then the SIU will respond in that specific instance. But for the purposes of our discussion today at this stage, your written submission suffices, as well as this presentation. I don't know if you were intending to make further remarks. I want you to give the opportunity for you to finish. I have some questions of clarity on the presentation, that's all.
Apparently, NIP is national intelligence priorities. So, thank you, Chair. We're done.
Okay, sorry. I'm just going to ask some questions of clarity on the presentation. So if you can go back some slides back to the before the vetting, the SIU investigations. There was that summary slide that you showed that had 1,000 and some odd referrals. This one, right? And there are two things that have concerned me there. The first one is the 467 individuals and companies recommended to be added to the National Treasury's Restricted Suppliers Register. Currently, only one of this list appears on the Restricted Supplier Register. So that's the one. Then there is the issue of the red part of the presentation. 370 finalized, 608 in progress, and then 300 awaiting information, which is a staggering number in my view. So the question I'm going to ask through you, Deputy Minister, is can you just give us a sense of how the presidency oversees progress in this? Because if the presidency wants information, if I was an official, the president's office wants information on something. If they said 7 days, I would try and provide it in 4 or 5 days. It seems unbelievable to me that the presidency itself would be awaiting information in 300 cases. So I do need to understand the process of what happens? Why do these get ignored? Because I am certain you are waiting information because you've sent a request for the information. They just haven't sent it. So can we get an insight on why that is? As well as the non-responsiveness on the 467.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. I think just before Jonathan comes in, I think you would know that, and this is in the report, that the responsibility of department rests on the shoulders of accounting officers. And that is why Treasury is now developing regulations to ensure that this responsibility does not only lie with accounting officer, that Treasury itself is able to debar, to deal with reluctance in the debarment of suppliers and all sorts of malfeasance that could be associated with that department. It's a matter that we are obviously concerned with. And we are, as I said, we are content that there is work done by National Treasury so that this responsibility is able to be undertaken, not just at a micro, but at a macro level. Jonathan, I want you to deal with the issues related to the outstanding information.
Sorry, Deputy Minister, can we stay on this? So for me, it does not appear that the problem is an administrative one. The problem is the accounting officers who feel no responsibility to do this. Treasury actually has little to do here. Treasury has little to do except to input the information that accounting officers must action within X period. So the color I'm looking for, is there a directive or similar from Presidency or from Cabinet, whichever way the executive works, that says when there has been a referral like this, it needs to be with Treasury within a certain period. We said we would deal with systemic issues, so this is the conversation. I need to know, on behalf of the committee, is there a directive that says when a supplier has to be restricted, that information must be with Treasury within a certain time, so that the consequence does not lie with Treasury. If that official doesn't do it, that official is then disciplined. So that's what I'm looking for.
Okay. As we said, Chairperson, the Public Procurement Act enforces a framework for the Department of Suppliers who are obviously found in the wrong. But in the aftermath of any act, there are regulations that are developed to ensure that there is enforcement of the act. And that is why we're saying that National Treasury is currently seized with those regulations. Those regulations are meant to ensure that there's enforcement of the department. Yes, of course, there are weaknesses, and also we have not risen to the occasion in terms of making sure that there's that enforcement. But that is also, that work is also somehow, for a lack of a better way, make sure that enforcement takes place, and that it's not just it doesn't rest only with the accounting officers, that National Treasury itself is able to ensure that that department takes place.
All right, no, thanks, Jim. I'll leave this part of the conversation to the members to contribute to as well. Can I allow you to continue on the red part? One of the colleagues was going to.
Thanks, Chair. So, yeah, the category awaiting information indicates that a number of scenarios, potentially of those, well, so of that number that we are tracking, some of those are not yet due. We give them a month to respond. Some of those are not, that time frame has not expired. So that's the happy scenario version of that. So it does contain another category is, so it relates to the process that is followed and that is subject to this ongoing improvement process. So the Presidency receives two types of reports from the SIU. A final report and an interim progress report. The standard practice within the administrative part, the issuing of the correspondence, the letters from the President to the affected organization were only done with regard to final reports. But our process here in terms of collating all of the referrals, regardless of what category of report they appear in, has revealed that some of the referrals or recommendations contained in interim reports have not, so were not issued from the Presidency side. So we don't have sight of those, the status of those. So that is a systems challenge that we are addressing. There are instances where we have no response, and we have a system, we've put in place a system of follow-ups. Currently, we have not the system that we are developing with CETA has the or deploying. The system is developed, but we are deploying it. We haven't deployed the functionality that allows us to automate requests for updating information. So, but in terms of the issuing of correspondence, the follow-ups from the legal and executive services within the Presidency, we do have some departments that are not responding. So that is a problem as you defined, but it's not all, they don't all fall into that sort of recalcitrant category.
Yeah. All right. No, thank you very much. Can we then move? This is my last question. Then I'll hand over to the. So on the vetting of officials, I just want to get clarity. I mean, you don't have to show a slide, basically. So I do appreciate that there are instances where people have to get various levels of security clearance, top secret, whatever the categories are. Am I correct in my assumption that not everyone in government is to get a top secret clearance, right? And that in those instances, the normal vetting of an employee would then take place, where you're looking for the usual things. And I will explain my question in this way. So one of the risks, so I used to work for a financial institution. And the process of vetting takes place before you get hired. So sometimes they make you an offer subject to the vetting, and the vetting is completed within a reasonable time, and they tell you, sorry, we can't take you. And, for whatever reason. There are various risks that process would surface. So for instance, someone with a gambling problem would be a high risk in terms of being an accounting officer, and also in terms of working in supply chain management and so on. I'm just making an example. Is there something preventing the government from also engaging the services of organizations that offer that level of vetting? So what I'm trying to ask is, are we being reasonable in sending everybody to the SSA? Given the size of the government in all three, okay, let's say the two spheres perhaps, but basically the need arises in all three. The city of Joburg is as big as the largest companies, right? I just want to understand why we're not able to do that, because we end up with people who are in the system unvetted for years when they don't even need the top security clearance.
Personally, I think I partly agree with you. But I'm also of a firm view that we need to continuously build on government capacity. And when it lacks, we can then defer to, all other sort of aid that could be external. But I'm of a view that we must build state capacity that is responsive to similar challenges that you have alluded to. I'm sure DPSA can give a better counsel on whether this model that you are suggesting can work better than expanding on the capacity that we have in the state.
No, I appreciate that, DM. What I'm saying is that what we're sitting with here is a problem that is undealt with. For years. The cabinet directive was in 2014. That was 11 years ago. I honestly, I'm the biggest fan of a capable professional state. So, in the US, things are done by the FBI, and I think that's correct, right? And I want the same here. But what we're sitting with, DM, is that while we're waiting for the state to be capable, people are then performing mischief, undermining the very professional state that we say, and ethical state that we say we are trying to build. And it seems unreasonable to me that we choose to wait until one day we've solved the problem, tens of billions of rand gone later on. That's my point. But let me leave that with you. Please go ahead.
President, I don't think that we must behave as if nothing has been done or achieved thus far. I mean, there are vetting field units that have been established. They need to be capacitated to make sure that they are able to fulfill their responsibilities. And this was as a response to the gap that was identified that you are referring to. So in a nutshell, there is work underway. There, as I said, the vetting units that were established as per directive of the DG in 2022. we need to make sure that they're fully capacitated to be able to discharge this responsibility before even looking at external capacity. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I don't want the monologue. Honorable Mende, I hope you are ready because I'm starting with you today. And can I also please ask members, we had a discussion here during our stretch session that we want to ask penetrating questions and give members enough time. So can we ask more questions and make less statements, if that's okay?
Thank you very much, Chair. Now, Chairperson, I don't have much because one thing we are only looking for is implementation of what the SIU has recommended. And we only need cooperation between the presidency and what they have proclaimed and signed off. So once the proclamation is investigated, we shouldn't have issues except if there are grounds of inconsistencies, which I find them not to be a holding ground per se, because during the process of investigation, I'm sure there are feedbacks that you exchanged amongst yourselves and paving a way forward as to are we still on track or not. Now, where SIU has given you recommendations and finalized any investigation, we are only expecting that there should be implementation and a tracker. A tracker is for the issues that we have. One, we have a biggest problem in South Africa where officials, when the SIU is investigating, some officials resign. They flag them and they report. But we don't see the presidency acting on those officials. Besides the fact that we will proceed with criminal cases and disease and everything. And the disease to these officials, they most of the time very lenient. And the very same officials then pop up in either at municipality or entities. But the cycle doesn't change. They still produce the same result because their incompetence will not be changed by the change of environment. It's either the presidency recommends training, a very strong training for officials, or we remove people, in particular those that are implicated with malfeasance, the maladministration and the corruption thereof. Now, I want to understand one, where there is vetting, the chair has been asking this question, where vetting is outstanding and where we find that there are people who have been employed in these areas of government and we have been asking for vetting of these officials. What keeps it on hold for so much? I think we all have already the example of what happened at ESCOM when that guy left, then wrote a book, and then after we all realized that the guy was never vetted and he refused. What do we do when a person is refusing to be vetted? Why are we not removing them instantly? Why do we keep them until they are gone? The second thing is the officials that have been recommended to be removed. Why are they getting opportunities to be employed elsewhere without being removed? And this is because there is non-implementation. But the last one is, how do you monitor if the departments are implementing all the investigating and that are finalized by SIU due to proclamations signed by your office? Thank you.
We're waiting for the direction of the chair. Thank you, Chairperson. No, I think most of the questions have been asked. I just need a few clarities, because if you look at the number of referrals to the Presidency for disciplinary hearings, which is 1,278, and then you look at the number of dismissals, which only sits at 44. I just want to check now, why is it? Why do we have such a low number of dismissals? What are the outcomes of the other investigations? And then, if a majority of the people are exonerated when they are referred to disciplinary hearings, then doesn't that reflect a flaw in the SIU's investigative capacities? And also, I wanted to check the issue of the mandate of the SIU and its investigative powers. There was an issue that was once raised when the SIU visited the committee, where some of the cases have to be referred back to the Hawks, which you feel like that is doing double work, because the Act empowers the SIU to do investigations and make referrals straight to the SIU. Just want to check if that has been resolved. And then, in terms of the resignations before disciplinary committees, what is the way forward? Because in our joint visits to the Free State and the Northwest, you would find that it's the same group of people, chief financial officers, municipal managers, that mess up local government municipalities, resign, and then they get picked up in another municipality. It's like a syndicate of rogue officials who are just taking advantage of loops within the system. So what are we going to do to address that, given that these people are the same people that are collapsing local governments? And then, on the central database, I don't understand why it is taking so much time, or there is no communication between the silo mentality still persists, where there is no communication between the line departments and the central database, where it can be, you are saying that some of the action plans is that it will be automated so that it reflects. So can that be done in a very urgent manner? And then, references, it also baffles my mind why the state would struggle to get information. If I'm being vetted, if I do not want to give my bank statements, the state is empowered to go to the banking institutions and say, can we be given information of this person? The Financial Intelligence Center has the information. Why isn't the state going to that, using those resources? And then that how can, especially if a person is going to be employed by the state, they refuse to be vetted, and those people still end up being employed. So what's the point of having vetting as a requirement if you are going to employ someone who just refuses to be vetted? And then also, when you are giving us a breakdown of the disciplinary hearings, can you just give me a brief explanation of the words that you say administrative? So when you say administrative, what kind of transgressions are those? When you say it's systemic, what kind of transgressions are those, and the prevalence of those transgressions? Thank you.
Yeah, we'll take answers after you, Honorable Atkinson.
Yeah, Chair, I think you assume that Honorable Mente will take a very long time until you come back. Unfortunately, today she was short and she finished before you come back. And the meeting was on autopilot. There was no chairperson.
No, I have had 35 missed calls from the same number. So, like when you've got kids and things, you start worrying. So I go back, it's a delivery.
Thanks very much, Chair, and thanks very much to the Presidency for the presentation. If I could just ask one question, I think it's got quite important legal ramifications here. If, in accordance with the presidential declaration in 2014, that there are certain positions that actually need a security clearance, and a reasonable period of time has gone by and the person still hasn't got a security clearance, could you not then say that legally that person actually hasn't been appointed? And I think it's quite an important factor here, because if we ever get to a situation where that particular senior official's decisions are brought before court, a court could say, actually, well, you were never really appointed because you never fulfilled the criteria of, or you never fulfilled one of the main requirements of your appointment, which is to come up with your security vetting. Because certainly in the private sector, as Honourable ZB pointed out, that's done beforehand, and that would be, it would result in you not being appointed if you actually don't get the security vetting. So I'm just questioning the legal liability here and the possibility that actions of that particular individual could be overturned. And then the second thing is this issue again of people resigning when they've been doing bad stuff, when they've been faced with a disciplinary. We've had a particular issue here with the Road Accident Fund where the acting CIO had been an employee in the city of Johannesburg, had placed money with the Gupta-linked organisation Regiment's Capital. When he was finally told to withdraw it because there wasn't proper approval for it, the city of Joburg made a loss in the tens of millions of rand because of that. And he faced a disciplinary inquiry and then obviously promptly resigned and then popped up again at the Road Accident Fund and said no, that he hadn't done wrong. And obviously we checked with Joburg, and the story that he was telling us and the story that Joburg had was basically at odds. So I know that the public service are looking at a situation whereby they can red flag people who either have been fired or certainly in these instances where there almost needs to be an amber light. There needs to be a warning light on people like this because there's too much of this going on. I mean, we went on municipalities in Northwest and Free State in the last 2 months. And it's like a disease. Just about every municipality, people jumping around, they're doing bad things here, they move on elsewhere, whatever. It's a problem, and that's leading to the dysfunction of local government in South Africa. So my concern is that this is something that the Public Service Commission, that the Minister, I think, said a year ago they're going to do. There's been no progress on it. Nothing's happened. And I do think that if we are going to run an honourable and honest public service, this is something that actually has to be put into place. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much. Over to you.
Thank you very much. Before I hand over to the colleagues here, we want to repeat the fact that we've said that there's a need for a digital coordination, and that is what is currently ensuing, and monitoring a mechanism to ensure that the reports and process and recommendations are implemented. And this is done in collaboration with the Presidency, the SIU, CETA, and to some extent NPA. We want to repeat also the fact that once a matter has been referred for prosecution, we do not, the Presidency does not operate in that value chain because we want to retain the independence of our criminal justice system. The other point is that once, and I agree with Honourable Mente, that some officials resign to evade accountability. And there are also instances where those officials are not pursued because they are no longer part of the system. I'm going to request that the colleagues delve into details on how we respond to that and how we've been able to respond to that. You would understand that the Presidency can only discipline its members fingered in the investigations. And because the reports are socialized with various government departments, the expectation is that these government departments must ensure that there's enforcement of discipline. However, what the committee wants to know, Jonathan and yourself, Rory, is what do we do in instances where there's an action? And I think that's what we must respond to. Jonathan, and then you'll conclude.
Thank you very much. And thank you for the questions. Some of the questions I'm not going to be able to answer, particularly around the sanctions available should a person refuse vetting, and in that kind of space. So I'm not going to attempt those, but I can provide some answers to questions related to the matter of resignations and the efforts that are underway to address this. So the Central Register project, as you mentioned, has been announced and been to Cabinet and is functional. So you can go onto the DPSA's website and you can, if you have an ID number, you can put in the ID number into the website. And it will, if there's a match with that ID number to a match on the Central Register for a dismissal, it will give you which was the dismissing organ of state and what date that dismissal was done. The regulations to enforce are currently in development by the Minister of Public Service and Administration. They've gone out for public comment, and they are they're being developed. The regulations are being issued under the Public Administration Management Act, which gives the power to the Minister of Public Service and Administration to issue regulations for local government, which around regarding disciplinary matters. So that's, one of the challenges is the constitutional separation of the spheres of government. But this act does empower the minister to issue these regulations. We've been very successful with public service departments. All of them use the PERSAL system, the personnel and salary system for the payroll system. But on that system, there's also fields that capture things like dismissal date, reasons for dismissal. There are also fields for resignation, pending disciplinary cases. So in all the provincial and national departments, we've got a pretty good handle on that. We've run various exercises as the working group around this, led by DPSA, to bring in additional data. So for example, the Treasury issued a circular requesting all state-owned enterprises to submit the last 5 years of records of people that have been dismissed or resigned. So those have been incorporated. Local government has been more difficult because of its highly decentralized nature. You have to really get, we were able to identify that quite a small number of service providers were providing the payroll system. So we thought we may have a quick way to get all that data, but we were then directed back to engage with each of the councils of all the municipalities, which is an enormous task, falling to COGTA. So this is a work in progress that is functioning. There've been DPSA has issued circulars to everyone, all departments, to use this as part of their employment process. So you would need to go as part of and this will be in, I assume, will be in the regulations, that when you appoint someone to a public service or administration position, as part of the employment process, you would need to input in their ID number into that. If you received a match, you would have to include that as part of the interview process, because we must also remember that the dismissals have been weaponized against good officials by bad accounting officers. It's a powerful weapon. Put them on suspension, or keep them. And so resignations, one cannot automatically assume that a person who is dismissed should never be employed, but they should certainly need to account for it in an interview. So that's the step. You would need to, as an employer, go to you get given the dismissing organization. You would need to go and satisfy yourself and record in your interview process the reasons why you decided to appoint, notwithstanding the fact that they appeared on this register. So we're trying to also build in some protection as well for potential employers. PERSAL has an automatic exclusion if you are dismissed. There's a time period, 5 years, 10 years, depending on what the reason was. So you can't be employed in any department, provincial or national, if you on that you've got a block on your against your ID number. So that's, but it's the state-owned enterprises and the local governments that are more complicated, which we are working to bring in into this single system of accountability. In terms of the resignations, what's supposed to happen? What the receiving department is required to receives, say if someone is, we had a case in the Northwest where someone was deployed to the Premier's office, and it was necessary that the disciplinary case followed them. And we had a dismissal, in fact, in this recently, where an official was resigned and joined another department. They were dismissed at that department, or sanctioned. Sorry, I speak under correction. But that disciplinary hearing followed them. So that's what's supposed to happen. Again, it's if there is the kind of syndicate that the members are alluding to, where there's the circulation, then it's the resilience and robustness and dependency of the administrative systems to make this visible. And that's really the space that we are our theory of change is if we manage to build those administrative systems across different spheres of government, different organs of state, different state-owned enterprises, through regulations, through enrollment, through creating the opportunities for them to join that system, the incentives, then we will win on that. It is an immensely complex task. I think a lot of folk outside of the state underestimate the size of the state, the complexity of the state, and the obstacles in the way of reforming administrative systems and building systems. In terms of the categories of sanction where there are finalized cases. So in the slide, we just pulled out the dismissals from the guilty. They've been, in terms of the outcome, if I can just give you the exact figures here, where we've had guilty findings of those total number, we are, sorry, I might need to come back to you on that, but we've had 43, if I go through this here, we've, one of the guilty verdicts, the contract was not renewed. One was sent for corrective counseling, that was the sanction. 2 were demoted. The 44 were dismissed. 43 received final written warnings. 2 received final written warnings with suspension without pay. 3, apologies. 8 received suspension without pay, and 30 received written warnings. So out of the finalized number, we had 138 that were found guilty. We had the 55 resignations, and we had declined to act. Accounting officers considering the information from SIU and declining to prosecute, to effect disciplinary processes, and we had people, deceased people, retiring, etc. So it's a large body. And I think we also need to remember that because you are recommended for a disciplinary process based on an SIU investigation, you must be assumed still to be innocent. It's just because your name appears on a list does not make you guilty. There is a need for due process, and so these whether the processes themselves were sufficient integrity, those are the questions we need to keep asking. But it's not just 55. Yeah, I don't know if that answers the question. Yeah, but we have.
Can we commit to providing granular details on the outcomes of those DCs for future purposes? It should be quite
no, you can
elaborate as Jonathan has attempted, Chair. Thank you very much.
Now, I just want to, because the COO, indicated he wants to say something, so he might assist you and I out of our follow-up questions.
I hope so, Chairperson. And thank you so much, Chairperson. I think Jonathan has covered this matter of the officials who have been flagged and the arrangements that are being put in place, both administratively and through the rules, the legislation, for the database. So that's the one that I'm not going to address. I want to address three of the others, Chairperson, if I may. The first one, Chairperson, relates to the whole question of, and then what do we do in the event of non-cooperation? Now, Chair, I think what the committee, what the Department of the Presidency maybe needs to say firmly in the committee is that as far as the tools are concerned, the policies, the contracting, the rule book, the DPSA guidelines, but Chairperson, public sector recruitment is unlike recruitment outside of the public service. It is so regulated, it's a procurement process. If you pick up the advert, let's start with the advert, then let's go to the selection panel, then let's go to the appointment letter, then let's go to the contract. All of those stages in recruitment have the tools that we need. When the advert goes on the circular, the DPSA circular, if it's a position that needs security clearance, the advert itself says so. Then the candidate arrives in the interview. It's a prescribed format that when the interview ends, the DBSA prescribed format requires the secretariat in the interview to ask the candidates at the end of the interview whether they have any declaration of any outstanding disciplinary that the panel needs to know about. If the candidate decides not to be truthful, that is immediately grounds for that person to be removed when it becomes known to the employer that they've not been truthful and that they've not disclosed. Then, Chairperson, the candidate is successful, the candidate gets an appointment letter. The text in the appointment letter explicitly says that your appointment is subject to your vetting and if there's any other outstanding things that are needed. And it's in the appointment letter, so there's a fallback from a legal point of view. And then when you sign the contract, it's a clause in the contract. So the folly is sometimes the act of omission administratively can affirm an appointment because the tools aren't being used. So a resolve to apply our tools effectively in the execution protects the employer, protects the public service very, very well. They're all in place. If there are things that need to be closed, and there are things that need to be closed on the enforcement. So that's the first one I wanted to just point out to the committee, Chair. And then the other two that I wanted to just touch on was on the disciplinary. There are, but not many, accounting officer, head of an entity, head of a provincial department, a DG of a province or of a national department who isn't disappointed and frustrated many times at how long a single disciplinary hearing takes. And that disciplinary hearing requires a number of parties to be in the room to avoid a postponement. You need the presiding officer, you need the prosecuting officer, and you need the party who is facing the disciplinary. So often, a disciplinary hearing is dragged out because of postponements, because one of the three parties is not available because they're ill or they have a double booking with another disciplinary and so on. So one of the members asked the question about the length of time that it takes. My experience as an accounting officer is, and obviously sometimes it's tactical on the side of the accused, but sometimes we really struggle with an outside presiding officer or an outside prosecuting officer. Many of the departments are saying, therefore, the training of internal players for those disciplinaries needs to be improved so that we can move them quicker. In the department that I represent, we track it. All labor relations issues are on a spreadsheet, and we red flag it when it's taking too long. And we had a bigger problem earlier, just our department, and that's been rolled back. And then, Chairperson, the last matter, which I'm not going to go into depth on, because DPSA, as the Deputy Minister has said, must speak on the whole matter of vetting. We are conscious that there is a backlog to catch up on. It has been discussed at the highest level. It just requires a concerted collaboration between the players. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks very much. Honourable Mendel, I'll come back to you. I just want to say, so my observation, Honourable Deputy Minister and your colleagues, is that when I listen to you, I feel like we don't have an executive presidency. There is a problem of people not fearing consequence from what the presidency wishes the government to do. Because all of these things that I'm hearing, they are solvable. There are other areas of the state that have solutions, regulators that have solutions for what you do. So please, for example, speak to the governor of the Reserve Bank. They have a register of every prescribed officer in the financial sector and the people that would act on their behalf. All of those people are vetted. I was one of those. The state already does this. Why we don't have an accounting officer register in South Africa is beyond me. There is nothing stopping us from having one. And I don't think if the president issued a directive to say this must be done, there would be somebody who says, I don't want. So my frustration is that you sound like contemporaries of the people you oversee. I'm not saying start swearing here in the meeting, but I'm also feeling frustrated because there are people who don't do this, there are people who don't do that, they don't do this on time and so on. If the rule was, if we can't find your references, we're not going to hire you. Phone that guy, and that guy needs to be available by Friday. If he or she is not available by Friday, you're out of a job. If I was looking for a job and Honorable Mende was not available, I'm phoning Honorable Mende and I'm telling you, we'll pick up that phone tomorrow morning when they call you. So for me, the fact that people don't cooperate with the process means they don't respect you. That's all it says to me. And I think that needs to change, please, because a lot of these are eminently solvable. So that's my comment, that's my frustration. People need to have a level of fear for the presidency, a healthy fear, and I don't feel it in your presentations today. I just don't. I don't want to monopolize the time. Honorable Mende, did you have a follow-up on your, quickly please, and then we'll go to Honorable Isaac.
No, thank you, Chair. No, this is prompted by some of the responses that you may find some of the departments that do not comply with recommendations, in particular on DCs, where they just don't charge people at all. I want to check, are there such instances you know of, and what have become your remedy to such situations? But secondly, the endless postponements on DCs, because the Code of Good Practice and the labor laws and the fair labor practice things that are there are governed by our own laws, all of that. And we can't have a situation where a DC takes 3 years and it has never really set. It's just a matter of we sit, there's 2 people, we ask for postponement. We sit, there's 3 people, they go say, we're still reading the documents. There ought to be a restraint on, you have said for so many times, and therefore we're proceeding without you. There is such a provision in the law, but those provisions are not being utilized, and we are perpetually kept in a cycle of people that never get to be charged and be removed from the system. But I want to check then from your side, related to what the chair is saying, what do you do in those cases? Because there ought to be someone who is knocking some sense into the departments that this doesn't work like that. You either do it or we remove you as an accounting officer. Thank you.
Thank you. For the sake of time, can we give Honorable Isaac and Honorable Gupek and so on a chance? So please note those questions and comments so that we can keep moving.
Thank you. Good morning, Chair, colleagues. Thanks for the opportunity. Chair, lots has been ventilated, and I mean, the presentation, obviously, I think has been pretty concise. So, and Chair's obviously made it very clear to us that, you know, we should cut down on our comments and concentrate more on some effective questions. But, you know, what has been ventilated is basically what I needed to also chat about. And the issue, I think, and you've heard it before, is this one on the statistic on the restricted suppliers. And obviously it's a huge matter of concern based on the timelines. And every other day, you know, in the media, we read some damning article or the other. And I think for South Africans, this is hugely now disappointing in terms of the timelines, Deputy Minister, colleagues. And I hope that perhaps when you come back on the next round, that you'd honestly be able to give us some concrete information with matters being concluded. I mean, you cannot, you know, have 467 individuals, like your slide alluded to on tracking recommendations. It's in the presentation. You got 467 individuals and companies that are recommended to be added to the National Treasury's list. You know, you were here in November. Almost a year has elapsed. Next thing, it's 2026. Where are we headed? Chair, I'll pause there. Thank you.
Thank you. Honorable Gubega.
Thank you, Chair, and greetings to the Deputy Minister and his team. Chair, by way of firstly a comment, I know you said we must minimize these. There's a section where it says, in the presentation, that says, building the ethical state, implementation, coordinating, and monitoring the President's response to the State Capture Commission. Now, Chair, in the President or the Presidency, looking at the State Capture Commission, you find that some of the people that were mentioned in the State Capture Commission were recommended by the President to his cabinet. Now, that now for me is a preamble for the issues that we have with consequence management within our state. The role of the President in the work of the SIU, reviewing investigation reports with consequence management and recommendations, I just wanted to ask, and here's the first question. The Auditor General also issues out a lot of recommendations. So the question is, what happens to these recommendations that are given by the Auditor General? Now, I ask this because the Auditor General is also giving very concrete recommendations for especially municipalities, because they deal a lot with municipalities. And those recommendations, a lot of them speak to consequence management. Now, does the President look at those? Are those recommendations taken seriously at all? Do they carry any weight? And then, Chair, there were 44 officials dismissed, 1 HOD, 3 municipal managers. Chair, you know that we've just recently had a joint sitting of Coctas, COAG, and SCOPA on municipalities in Free State and Northwest and Johannesburg. Chair, out of those municipalities, I would like to believe that about 60–70% of those municipalities, they are completely dysfunctional, and Auditor General has said that they cannot continue as a going concern because they are bankrupt. Now, it's very concerning that you'll find that only 3 municipal managers are mentioned here when those entities are basically run and collapsed by municipal managers. So I just want to ask, the question there is it accurate to say that only 3 municipal managers have been dismissed? That's the next one. And then, Chair, again, you spoke to this earlier, 467 individuals and companies recommended to be added to the National Treasury's Restricted Suppliers Register. Currently, only 1 of these appears on that list of Restricted Supplier Register. This is another huge, huge failure on the consequence management by the Presidency. I'm not sure if they would want to speak to that. And then the last one, Chair, the non-compliance of vetting subjects. I think for me this is very simple, like you alluded to earlier as well, that should anyone not comply with something like that, should that not be an immediate disqualification? They should just be disqualified. Okay, you're not complying, you should be just disqualified immediately. I would like to hear the Presidency's comment on that. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chair. I thought you were going to end with Mr. Upe and get answers.
Were you still thinking?
No, I wasn't.
Are you not ready?
You know, the only thing I'm thinking about is how do I not dwell on the comment and questions. Because in my own opinion, I think the President could have just sent us a paragraph saying there's no progress on the things you asked. We'll try and come back some other time. Because I'm looking at my notes here.
You would get upset with me if I said I received a WhatsApp.
No, a letter, just a letter to save traveling costs and accommodation and taxpayers' money. Look, we in the last meeting, there were 51 companies recommended for this registration on the 13th of November. I have not had that the update in relation to that. I'm trying to link it with the 467 individuals, because the last time we spoke of companies, this time we speak of individuals. If 467, if it's the same thing or if it's different things. And Chair, we're dealing with one government. You know, we've repeated these things quite a number of times. If you were sitting somewhere, you'll think maybe we're dealing with different governments. We're dealing with one government, and this is a presidency. The inability to hold other parts of government accountable for the deliverables of the presidency or the president is a serious concern. In fact, in my mind, it boils or creates an assumption of unwillingness more than inability. Because these are very educated and smart gentlemen and very senior executives. Some of these things we're suggesting here are known. I've worked in human capital for over 10 years. The reference checks and processes are done but where it is not, a provision is given that within a particular time frame, and it becomes the responsibility of the applicant not the employer to chase around those references or whatever the case is. So if the applicant fails, there's normally a clause that covers that in an event that we can't verify that, we shall automatically terminate. And I think these things are known, at least a logical or common sense level. I can't sit here and recommend them here at this high level. It would be a waste of time. So I think we need to be told what is the level of the state's willingness to administer consequence management and ensure effectiveness. We need to be taken into confidence around that so that we can bring these matters closer to home. This is a critical enabler of corruption. It's a critical enabler of poor performance and inability of the state to deliver. Because if I know that I'm not going to be listed, or that is going to take 5 years or in fact even a year, my fellow honorable member here spoke of the municipalities we've been to, where you find that 80% of COs are on acting capacity, and it's not an operational, deficiency. It's a deliberate tactic to ensure that there's an evasion of accountability, so that whenever you come, there's a new person who says, no, it's legacy problems. I was not here. I'm only here on acting capacity. And then the next 6 months, you come back again. There's someone who say, I'm new. We're turning the corner. It's what we hear every day. We're turning the corner. These are legacy problems. You're dealing with the same government, the 6th administration under the same president, 7th administration under the same. These problems were known last year in November when we arrived here, that there's a challenge with treasury, there's a challenge with these institutions that are supposed to do all of these things. We're sitting here a year later. We only have got three and a half years as the 7th administration. We are learning that there are some regulations that are proposed for amendment somewhere in a corner. And that's a laissez-faire attitude that our people can no longer afford, because it takes forever to turn this corner. And by the time that we think we are reaching it, the administration term has ended. Another administration comes and say, no, these are legacy problems, as if they are new problems. We've been post-democracy for 30 years. We can't accept that. So, Chair, I wanted to maybe say, as a question, I think it's the second one from the things that I've said. What is a consolidated intergovernmental plan to expedite these interventions that the department is talking about? So when I'm speaking about it, I'm speaking about bringing all the, do these parties ever sit in one table, Treasury and all of the presidency and all of the stakeholders? Do they hold bilateral meetings where they sit down and say, how do we expedite this, the resolving of this crisis? So that we don't, unless if SCOPA wants to play that coordinating responsibility to call all of them in one room. But I believe they can do it in their own accord. And between the 8 months that we have seen them, have they had that kind of an engagement? And what is the progress if they have? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Let me give you a chance to answer before your notes go to 5 pages.
Almost at 10. Thank you very much, Chairperson. Chairperson, the reason SCOPA is discussing vetting is because in your own realization, you discovered that there are officials who are in the employ of the state who are responsible for malfeasance who have not been vetted. That belongs in the past. We are very clear about the fact that vetting must predate appointment. Even in cabinet, where there are cabinet appointments done, they are not done without vetting reports. We await vetting reports. Well, I don't sit in cabinet, but I sit in cabinet committees that recommend. I can tell you now that there is no appointment that is conducted without a vetting process that has been concluded. The challenge is what would have occurred in the past, and that's what we are trying to remedy. And I'm saying there is an action plan, colleagues, that has been detailed. It's part of the presentation. So it can be that we are suggesting that there has been inaction since we last convened here. We are saying that there are regulations, Chair, that National Treasury is set with to deal with debarment, because there's a realization that there are weaknesses, because the inaction of the accounting officers has brought us to where we are today. So we're saying, rather let's not delegate this responsibility solely. And this is not just me, it's the Procurement Act that says it should be the responsibility of National Treasury. Now, the National Procurement Act was assented to in July last year. The legislative process is quite cumbersome. But we are reporting here that there are regulations that are being developed to address some of these inefficiencies. And I'm saying this is work in progress. I don't think we want to suggest that it's not work in progress. We must never assume, with all the executive powers that the president holds, that the president has got unchecked power. It's power discharged in line with the Constitution. And there are institutions of the state, for instance, that are empowered to delve into investigations. And that's why we're saying, with respect, for instance, to matters that are related to NPA, that's a value chain that the presidency does not enter into. We've also said, Chairperson, that we're going to work together with National Treasury to make sure that these matters are expedited, because we're here because there's a slow pace of delivery with respect to those regulations being finalized. You would know that the AG is empowered now to refer matters that are deemed to be criminal for investigation through law enforcement agencies. It's not actually the presidency. It is the AG that has now been empowered to refer matters to the criminal justice system to test whether there is a criminal activity that would have propelled action or inaction of specific public officials. Let me ask colleagues to speak. I'm also aware of the fact that the head of SIU wanted to comment, Chair. I'd like us to start with him before the colleagues respond.
No, thank you. Thank you, DM, and Honorable Chair and Honorable Members. There's a point that was made earlier on around just the observation of sort of lenient sanctions and whether there's a correlation or a link to reflect the flaw in investigations. So that is clearly not the case. We would have presented a file of evidence to the accounting authorities to take action. So the system of disciplinary hearings in public sector may probably just require a revisit, and we've stated this to DPSA. How we appoint and source initiators and the chairs of disciplinary hearings and so on. In some instance, of course, it's the accounting authority that is responsible and accountable for that. But in some instances, we've really picked up that process really has been wanting, where there would be inherent conflicts between the chair or those who initiate with those who are disciplined. And that's why I say we have sort of brought it up to the DPSA, just in terms of the overall disciplinary system of the public sector. Now, amongst others, and DPSA really is to consider that, is how do we, sort of monitor the issue around the appointment of chairs and initiators and so on. So the point I'm making is that there is some inherent improvements that have been identified. And then the issue about the referrals, I think the honourable member asked the referrals to NPA and then to Hawks. We have pointed that out before to the committee and to the NPA, because by law, when we find evidence pointing to criminal action, we are expected to refer it to NPA. And the intention, of course, is that the NPA should consider whether to prosecute or not. But often these matters are on-referred or sent to the Hawks. And the Hawks often repeat the investigations and so on. So that has been identified and acknowledged. And to a large extent, we're seeing referrals now being made to NPA and being attended to by IDEC, Investigative Directorate. So that almost cuts the on referrals. But on the overall, and this also comes out in the National Anti-Corruption Advisory Council recommendations, that we need to make sure that SIU or even the new entity that's recommended has got full powers to investigate, so that when they hand over, there shouldn't be any opportunity for on referrals. So this is a systemic problem addressed soon. The issue around the central register, and really we're pleased that the central register is functioning. It's really the administrative process around recruitment and so on, so that before you are appointed, it should simply be a matter when you conduct references, and I think this point has been made. When you conduct references, there should be a check. You use an ID, punch it into the system. The ID should indicate whether you have, moved from another state entity where you resigned before an action, and really you should not be appointed when that finding is positive. The issue around again resignations. The resignations in the view of disciplinary actions has been an issue, and it's really sort of continues to be, because this is now almost the grey area in the labor law, whether as an employer you can refuse somebody from resigning. It's really being a grey area in the labor law space. But often we see resignations, and employers, of course, accept the resignations, and then they move over to other state institutions. But what we do, of course, we always say, if evidence of criminality points to you, you'll be followed through. And we have now, for a while, the civil litigation process. If it identifies that you have played a role in the wrongdoing, we do cite you as a respondent in the civil litigation process. So it's not like they are left to no responsibility if they are if they've left their employment. I think that's really what I wanted to comment on. I didn't have any other part. Thank you.
Chairperson, may I offer some responses to two of the questions that came in the latest round. The first one is about the AGSA and the fact that the AGSA issues recommendations. What happens to those recommendations? Now, fortunately, committee members, well, I think the committee will think it's fortunate. There's nowhere to hide when it's in the management report from the AGSA or in the audit report. And the reason why I say that there's nowhere to hide is in the following year's audit, AGSA mechanically goes back to those recommendations and those findings. If AGSA did not concur with management's response to their finding, they follow it up. and they ask for the evidence that the action that they required in terms of the previous year's audit report has been implemented. Now, it doesn't end there. Often what you do find is that in the list, it's both what you might call the petties and the serious stuff. So, for example, if you take irregular expenditure doesn't automatically, as the committee knows, mean that somebody stole the money. But there was a non-compliance with a rule, a policy, a legislation. That automatically goes into the Loss Control Committee for consequence management. And accounting officers have to chase the whole list. We can't be selective. We have to chase the whole list, whether it's an irregular expenditure of 15 Rand or whether it's an irregular expenditure of 1.5 million. The whole list has to be changed. And one of the most consuming part of the follow-up audit the following year is being able to prove to the Auditor General that the consequence management has been taken. Accounting officers never want repeat findings. Because if you have a clean audit, that could take you back to lose your clean audit. If you have an unqualified audit, too many repeat findings can take you back to a qualified audit. So, but Chair, I could go on at length about this because there is a balance, because if departments are too busy chasing long lists, and some things we all know matter more than others, it can bury you in a long list of chasing corrective action when in fact you need to be very focused to make sure that you root out malfeasance. And the Chair, the only other one that I wanted to give the scoper some confidence on is this question about the ability of the Presidency to hold the rest of government accountable, and what is our appetite for consequence management. Do we have a consolidated plan, and do we sit around the same table? So, Chairperson, without pretending that there's not room for improvement, that is entrenched in the operations of how the Presidency coordinates, as a coordinating ministry, coordinates across all departments. Every single month, the panel of Directors General, I'm not talking about FOSSAT, I'm talking about the State Capture Commission, Steerco, convened by the DG in the Presidency with all the DGs, supported 2 weeks before by a technical team with other officials to prepare for that. That meeting is convened every single month, and in fact it sat yesterday. And in yesterday's meeting, interestingly enough, some of the more important outstanding matters, there were about 5 red matters. There was a very sharp and focused discussion led by the DG and the Presidency for the responsible accounting officers from the relevant departments to attend to that outstanding issue. So government has got a lot of work, but I think that the trick here to improve and get the satisfaction of the committee is to have a sharper focus, to understand just that some things matter more than others, and to get the job done. But I did want to give the committee the confidence that we have the governance arrangement set. It sits routinely. It follows up. We know what's outstanding. But I don't deny, Chairperson, that there is room for improvement operationally. Thank you.
Chair, just on the part of the AGSA, we appeared at a committee of Auditor General a week or so ago. And I think it's also a measure of really monitoring the matters that DM mentioned, that they do refer matters to law enforcement agencies. We appeared there with Hawks, and this is because the Public Audit Act, as amended, empowers the Auditor General to refer what they call material irregularities to SIU and to Hawks. So we've really processed quite a number. To date, we are dealing with about 19 referrals that are being investigated. Some are being processed through the the proclamations. So the point I'm making is that the AG also sort of monitors this space, but perhaps the Auditor General, and we have a MOU with them, could really go further. Could go further in terms of holding this state institutions to account, and even monitor the extent of consequence management. I mean, they could probably have insights to some of the reports that Presidency is presenting today, and this is and could probably include them in their audit scope, and just as another effort to monitor consequence management. And we, as part of our interaction, we really intend making that recommendations to the AG, and I think that will go a long way. We really appreciate that. But another last comment as I'm on the floor, with your permission, Chair. The issue around the 467 and its individuals and companies. Often state institutions, and again, the use of the word discretion comes up. But I think it's more the reason why we should monitor them, whether they are exercising their discretions rationally, and ensure that they process this. And so what we have started to do, over and above copying the referrals to the Presidency, so that National Treasury comes into the picture quicker, and not wait, for the state institution, is to copy the referrals to the National Treasury as well. Just as another effort, or really, of ensuring that National Treasury comes in as speedily as possible to ensure that these blacklistings happen speedily. Thank you.
Chair, if I can just clarify some of the questions that were asked at the levels of sort of detail. There was a question regarding the dismissal of municipal managers, and is it? I think the question was: is it correct that only 3 municipal managers have been dismissed? So these are 3 with links to SIU recommendations for disciplinary. It's not a global figure on the number of municipal managers dismissed across local governments. We don't have those figures here. This is just in relation to the sample of SIU referrals over the last 5 years. Then on the question of the difference between the 51 and the 467 companies and individuals, I think Advocate Muktibi's clarified that it's individuals who have like sole proprietor companies, etc. So, but the difference in the number is that it's a different sample. When we came in November, we were focusing in on a subset of recommendations which were for a proclamation related to covert procurement. As we were developing this capability, we've now expanded to have all, so the 497 is all referrals over the past 5 years. So we're slowly growing the capacity, to be able to track. Perhaps, we do certainly will integrate. We are already in discussions with DPSA around Persal to link the dismissals, but in terms of numbers of dismissed officials across the entire public sector, we're not speaking to that yet. It's just the SIU recommendations. Then on the question with regard to decisions not to, deciding not to proceed with disciplinary cases, as asked by Honourable Mente. So you asked whether there were such cases. Yes, there are. We have a list of these departments. And then the remedy, well, we require them to provide us with their reasons for their decisions. The onus does sit with the accounting officer on whether to decide to proceed. There's no legal requirement that they must initiate a disciplinary proceeding based on a recommendation. They're not legally binding recommendations. So we track, and again, as Advocate Matibi has indicated, the monitoring and making visible is a really important tool in the absence of a legislative tool to force, because the Constitution does require you to exercise your responsibilities rationally and in accordance with your responsibilities. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mike. Thank you. Honorable Skosana, Honorable Nondenja, and Honorable Skosana.
Honorable Skosana Senior, yes. Yeah. Thank you, Chair. Once again, disappointed as we are, and quite frankly, this was confirmed yesterday by the President. The President's assessment on the state of municipalities, there appears to be a problem between certain municipalities and provinces based on the reports the committee received from SIU and the Audit General. Now, the word appears, it's unfortunate that it was used. It doesn't appear, it's just like that. And it's unfortunate that I'm not sure, perhaps I must ask this quick question. Has Thulani Mdagane resigned from the presidency? Because the new COO, I'm not sure whether there's a difference, whether he was working for the late David President Mabuza, or was in the presidency, because Thulani Mdagane, I thought he was a COO in the presidency. I might be wrong. Number two, Chair, I did not attend the Bloemfontein one, but it was really, for me, disturbing for the President to be asking about, in terms of the national dialogue about whether water, what's the problem with water. Today we are sitting with the executives here, the CEO is here, and I think it's proper for us to ask him, because I guess they are responsible of briefing the President in the matters, as he said, that they are responsible in terms of what is happening in the country, whether local government or province, but we've got one government at the end of the day. The separation of power, we are quite aware of the separation of powers. But it's not far from where we are. Khayelitsha, Site C. You'll be embarrassed if you go there today. And we cannot pretend and speak big English here, about policies and why our people on the ground are suffering. Now, the issue of discipline, my colleague spoke about the 467. I'm not going to go there, but it's disturbing when you say there's only one which is been whether blacklisted or whitelisted, but which is listed as we speak here. Not that we don't know what's the problem. We know what's the problem. I can see people are saying, remember when we last met here, the extent and process of hiring competent individuals in the public sector, particularly in local governments here. We were in Johannesburg, where acting municipal manager or CFO, he recommends for himself. He approves for himself. And as we are speaking here, nothing has changed. As we are sitting here, nothing has changed. Eguruleni, somebody was killed there. CEO of CFOs have been killed. There's a number of them. And when I look at in terms of some cases here, 2019, those cases are not yet resolved. Now, I don't know how do we explain this to our, because these things, our people are raising them. You go to a national treasure, SITA, 2020, report under judicial review. You go to the Department of Water and Sanitation, disciplinary, 5 finalized. I've got a problem with that word, finalized. Finalized, and then what? Are people dismissed, or are people, what is the, when this word is used, finalized, what does that mean? In Johannesburg, irregular expenditure, 15 billion rand. My question is one. When the highly competent, qualified people who are working in the Johannesburg city, when those irregular reach R500 million, it reach R1 billion, 1.5, 2 billion, up to 15 billion rand. There's no consequence management. It's clear. Then, like my colleague said, you'll be told it's a legacy problem. By the time we meet them next year, some of those people we met won't be there. They'll be resigned. Recently, in the Polokwane High Court, one municipal manager from Tabazimbi was taken to court by a councillor for falsification of qualifications. He moved from 2 municipalities as a CFO. He ended up in Tabazimbi as a municipal manager. Now, I'm defeated. I'm defeated because these things are happening in front of us, not that we don't know. And we are expecting SIU to follow people. Every time, the people must be followed. Now, Chair, I'm repeating again here. As I said, I'm not sure whether we must get what they call it nowadays. There's no Form 5 nowadays. I think it's grade, there's grading. Maybe we must grade 10s. Because it looks like the more you get qualified, you're going to have another 15 billion rand irregular expenditure with no consequences at all. You know, but we are having competent, qualified, highly qualified people. For me and you, it's easy. For a person who doesn't know what he's going to have for supper tonight, and we are busy speaking here, saying we are able to identify problems, but we are not resolving them. We can go backwards from 1994. Or we can even go back even then, before the democracy. But I'm saying we must not continue letting our people down like what we are doing here. Because as I said earlier, not that we don't know what is happening. The issue, what are we doing about it?
Honorable Skosana,
thank you, Chair.
To wrap up. Thank you. Honorable Nontenja.
Thank you, Chair. I'm starting to wonder if the presidency sees itself in the same form that as SCOPA we see them. This is guided by the finger pointing that I'm hearing from the DM, where if it's not DPSA, it is NPA, it is the responsibility of the HGSA, and without telling us what is the responsibility of the presidency if they are not going to look at all these areas. They are looking at something which I don't know what. But I would like to know, why are they encouraging working in silos instead of synergies? For instance, when they list their challenges of that are contributing to delays in vetting of officials, one of them is the long turnaround time for fingerprints from SEPs. What are they doing about that? How are they improving on that? What needs to be done about that? Or is that in the regulations that are still going to come, which will not be implemented, because it's useless if they come and they're not implemented, like we have consequence management that none, you start from the bottom up to them, it's not implemented. And then they are complaining about the capacity and budget with vetting of the fieldwork units. How is their working relationship with the Treasury, where the purse is? SCOPA cannot capacitate those units, but they should have a working relationship that says, Treasury, instead of pointing the finger to the Treasury, you work with the Treasury. You work in synergy as the government, and we see improvement. And it's not clear what happens on the provision of references that are not easily accessible. And their report cites the president and the ministers. I mean, honestly, those people are not accessible. They're not easily accessible. And as my colleague said, if there is no vetting, there should be no position for the people. I would like to understand, Chair, on the 55 officials that resigned before disciplinary, was there anything that happened there? Or when you resign, that says you are off the hook? And I would like to know on the finalized cases, whether there were any recoveries. If there were, how much was that? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Honorable Skosana?
Yeah, no, thank you very much, Honorable Chair.
And not junior, just honorable.
no.
Just honorable Skosana.
Honorable Skosana with a long service in Parliament. Yeah, no, thanks, Chair, and greetings to everyone, all protocol observed. In the last meeting between this committee and the presidency, though I was personally not part of the meeting, but I know that honorable members raised the issue of underfunding of the SIU as one of the challenges. So, DM, have you, as the presidency, given thought about that particular matter? Because I believe that if we can deal with it, it would assist to make the SIU to be even more effective in the execution of their responsibilities. Secondly, with regards to the issue of the National Treasury's database of restricted suppliers, I just want to know how rigorous, consistent and thorough is the process of monitoring this database to ensure that there's full adherence to it. Because I'm just imagining that if a certain company does business with one rural municipality in a corner there in Eastern Cape, and then it's found wanting, next time the same company does another business with another rural municipality in a corner there in Limpopo. If the people in that area in Limpopo, in that municipality, they don't know about the track, is it easy for them to be able to really find out? Or they can only find out if there's somebody who can pick it up and raise it. Is then they can be able to check with the database. How rigorous is the process of making sure that there is adherence to it? And during your last year's appearance before the committee, I think you indicated that the SIU has been able to recover about 5 billion rands since 2013. And then that 1.4 billion rand was recovered between January and March 2024. So just want to find out what is the latest update regarding the recovery of money. Now coming to the issue of vetting, I think in your presentation you raised the issue of capacity and budget within the VFU, Vetting Fieldwork Unit, as one of the challenges that make the process to move very slow. So I just want to find out as to what are you doing about that. And then lastly, I think, DM, I think you made an important point that vetting should happen before an appointment. It can't happen after. But I think there are entities already who have appointed people who were not vetted. And when we interact with them, I think what they will tell us is that, no, we have submitted all documents to the SSA. So we are awaiting the SSA. So it's not our fault. We have submitted everything. The delay is with the SSA. So I don't know, how are you dealing with such cases? Because there are people, I think, in few entities. One that I can remember on top of my head is RAF. There are senior people there who have not been vetted. So how are you handling such cases? Thanks, Chair.
Thanks very much. So I'm taking note of time and that there are only 2 members. So let me just give Honorable Neil May and Honorable Beasley a chance to ask, and then you can deal with all the questions. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Honourable Deputy Minister, colleagues and all those present here. Most of my questions are on the slide, which is slide 10. And it's starting from the State Security Agency. I think we're a little disappointed with regards to the capacity of the State Security Agency. One would think that the State Security Agency should be the Rolls-Royce of the country, should have everything under control. You would expect that because it is responsible for the security of the nation, of your digital space, and all of that. And one can learn from the AG because she has a data academy where she has these young whiz kids who work on solutions. And you know, it's the AI. So basically, maybe we're looking at old technology and maybe we should be looking at the new technology and start to move into that frame. So I was wondering in the sense of what reforms are underway to strengthen the SSA capacity. And therefore it would improve your turnaround times. And I know there was a lot of discussion with regards to that. Also looking at your digital forensic capacity, which has been expanded across the agencies. What improvements have been implemented to secure that space? Because with enough money, you can expunge your records. I mean, they do it down at the Magistrates Court, they're doing it everywhere. So is there a plan to establish a centralized cybersecurity framework or command center across departments? Or should you not be looking in that area? Also, with regards to your review of anti-corruption architecture and overall of whistleblower protections, which is the second last bullet on that slide, what progress has been made to review the national anti-corruption architecture? Will this lead to a single independent anti-corruption agency? Should you not be looking at something like that? How will the overall of the whistleblower protection ensure both safety, physical and financial, and incentivize for reporting corruption? I think those are the most important things. You're seeing people don't want to come forward anymore. Whistleblowers are being killed, assassinated, you name it. And I think that is a challenge. And the last one on the legal reforms, talking about national intelligence reforms, anti-money laundering, public administration amendments. One of the other areas that I wanted to check was your relationship with international global networks like Interpol, UNODC, which is the UN Office of Drugs and Crime, and FATF, which is also the Financial Action Task Force Global. to strengthen the fight against corruption and organized crime. I mean, we've lost, and I know that the SIU have those international links, and our advocate being the chairperson of the International Association Against Corruption. I haven't got the title right, but I guess so. So, you know, we've lost intellectual property, strategic assets have been sold or shifted abroad, and I mean, the example is Dubai. So, and that is where the SA should work hand in hand with international intelligence partners to track illicit flows, illicit financial flows, recover assets and protect national interests. Right, but I guess so. So, you know, we've lost intellectual property, strategic assets have been sold or shifted abroad, and I mean, the example is Dubai. So, and that is where the SA should work hand in hand with international intelligence partners to track illicit flows, illicit financial flows, recover assets and protect national interests. We have these new AI, you know, whiz kids in there. I know that you are busy looking at your monitoring and evaluation. Someone is doing that. But what is your security on that? You know, you have to look at which other nations are keeping an eye and peeping into what you are doing. So it's very important that, thanks.
Thanks, Honourable Nilmay. Honourable Beasley.
Thanks, Chair. So you mentioned that you're frustrated. I'm angry. I'm so angry. I'm angry for every South African. I'm angry for the SIU. It's just doesn't make any logic that 1 out of 467 people, 460 companies and individuals have been blacklisted. People have died. They've given their lives fighting for corruption. And this is a joke. It's an absolute joke. And you guys should hang your heads in shame. And I'm angry. And it's really wrong. 1 out of 467 is totally unacceptable. The SIU is intentionally be watered down. Deputy Minister, how can you actually sit this and try and justify 1 out of 467? We spend millions on the billions on the SIU, and this is what we get. We raised this issue in November last year. Not one of the COVID guys have been blacklisted. This is an absolute joke. And Chair, as Action SA, we're taking this matter to the Public Protector because it's everything that's wrong with it. It says everything that's wrong with our country. And so I'm asking the Deputy Minister, does he support us taking it to the Public Protector? Does he see the urgency of this matter? Does he see it in the same light that I'm seeing it as a total disgrace? And you said, Chair, where's the President in all of this? Where is he? I mean, where is he? He's missing in action. 1 out of 46.7. It's a disgrace, and every person involved in this should hang their heads in their shame. And I feel desperately sorry for the SIU because they're doing great work. They're putting their lives at risk, and it is totally unacceptable. People have lost their lives, and we come here and we try and defend 1 out of 467. It's indefensible, Chair. It is shocking. It's one of the worst things that I've come across in my time at government. It's a disgrace. Thank you.
Thank you, honourable members. I'll hand over to you, DM. First, if you can deal with all the comments and questions, and then we'll wrap up with a way forward.
No, thank you very much. I'm going to I just noted a few issues, but I think some of them need to be clarified better by the colleagues next to me. The first thing is that I agree with the latter speaker about the fact that it's unacceptable. In fact, it's a matter that we've raised, and that is why we have urged National Treasury to expedite these regulations because they're quite important, so that it must not be dependent on accounting officers to actually blacklist companies that are found to be in the wrong. That National Treasury is a department that is inter alia expected to preserve the national pairs of the country, should also play that responsibility. And I think we take your comments, we accept your anger, as justified, and as I said, Chairperson, we will definitely ensure that the next time we appear here, as part of our constitutional responsibility to coordinate the work of different government departments, that is done. There's a suggestion that we are trying to recriminate, pass on blame to this or other entities. And I warned members earlier on about the assumption that the president has got unchecked powers. Every department has got a specific responsibility that is guided by law. And in discharging its responsibilities, it must do so in the best interest of the country. And that's why we had said DPSA is better positioned to expound on the vetting process, because we have absolutely no mandate to address you on matters of state security, because it is the domain of the Joint Intelligence Committee. It's not our own discretion, Chair. It's law. Intelligence Service Oversight Act enjoins that the matters that are related to state security must be discussed, including finances, must be discussed in that joint committee. That is why we saw it befitting that DPSA must come here to give clarity. For instance, I'm not aware that there's been a recent appointment at RAF, which is not compliant with the vetting process. It's absolutely ridiculous. Because as I said earlier on, Cabinet has said the vetting process must predate appointments. And that's why we think there's a need for DPSA to come here and give a proper account on the vetting process. We're not passing the buck. We're not, it's not a cop-out, Chairperson. It's the reality that the role of the presidency is to coordinate the work of state departments. And Rory has gone to town in expounding how that coordination takes shape. Referred to multi-sectoral engagements that are ensuing, led by our own DG, to make sure that some of the work that we are talking about find expression. We've also said that we are worried about the work of the state of local government. So you know, one of the functions of the president is to ensure that he coordinates the work of State Department, but also coordinates the implementation of national policy. Today there's a white paper on local government, which is responding to the 1998 white paper on local government to deal with issues that are persistent in local government. And that is how we want to also use legislation to address the challenges that we are faced with in local government. Cabinet 2 weeks ago resolved to invoke Section 1.3 legislation to address the challenges that we are faced with in local government. Cabinet 2 weeks ago resolved to invoke Section 1.3, and I'm sure it can be invoked in all other municipalities, because the state of many other municipalities, because the state of local government is quite a cause for concern. But the role of the presidency and the role of cabinet can only be, Chairperson, discharged in accordance with the Constitution, not with how the president wishes to discharge his responsibility. The president can't simply wake up and dissolve a municipality. He would have dissolved many municipalities by now. The Constitution is very clear about what national government can do to intervene in municipalities. So we note some of the concerns are quite severe. And where there are shortcomings, Chairperson, we accept criticism. Where there has been implementation at a snail pace, we accept criticism. But a suggestion that we have a presidency that does not seem to be, through demonstrable effort, able to take charge of what is happening in the country is not born of merit. As I said, we will have to come back to you at an appropriate time when you again elect to summon us to just give an update on some of these issues. And we hope that we simply wish to regurgitate the ask we made earlier that the Department of Public Service and Administration must be able to come here as a department that is responsible for ensuring good human resource in the public sector. Some of the issues that you think may have not been answered sufficiently, but also delve into specific concerns that have been raised by members. The Honourable Member of Action SA, I share in your anger. I honestly do share in your anger, and that is why we're doing everything in our power to ensure that these regulations are expedited. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairperson. And then when the work must get done, what counts most is actually operational and administrative. The strategies are clear. And so if the administration is more effective at tracking and following up actions, then I think it will turn. Chair, there are 5 specific issues that SCOPA needs to be advised of. The first, I'm going to start at the end and work back. The first one is the review of the national anti-corruption architecture. And some of the committees would not have picked this up, but 3 years of very hard work of the National Anti-Corruption Advisory Council has been completed. Now, those recommendations of 3 years of so now what do we do, the final report was presented to the President on the 28th of August. To the President on the 28th of August. So all of those recommendations of the entire architecture, anti-corruption architecture, are on the Presidency website. What happened at the meeting that I referred to earlier today, which was at the State Capture Commission Steering Committee, the panel of Directors General, yesterday, is that it was agreed by the DGs that for landing those recommendations into the decision-making structure. So it must now be prepared by the SCC and then on to Cabinet, so that the what now and Cabinet can then, because they are recommendations until they become resolutions of Cabinet, then they have executive authority. So that's where that work is at, Chairperson, to get to specific. You will not pick up any government strategy anywhere in the world where transformation within government to improve services to the citizens is not front and center. And in South Africa's case, it's no different. So it falls under priority 3 in the MTDP. And you would have noticed that it's also the priority that's been emphasized in the President's and South Africa's presidency of the G20. And there's a lot going on, and specifically from the Presidency side, what has been established is across whole of government coordination of the digital transformation of government. And we have our points person at a senior level responsible for that work from the Presidency as a coordinating ministry. But it doesn't end there, because government itself doesn't try to wave a wand and have a miracle. The presentation on page 2 refers to the work in this space that has been done through the JICC, the Joint Initiative on Crime and Corruption, and working with the private sector. So if the committee wants more detail on drilling down on that, we can give it. The third question, I think, and then Jonathan might want to elaborate on both the one I've just answered and the next one. The recoveries, I think it was Member Skosana, the second Member Skosana, specifically asked about the latest update on the recoveries of money. That's in the report. It overshadows, and the public don't know this, because you see in the media that the State Capture Commission cost R1 billion, but so what? Well, it's in the report. The recoveries, and still counting, is close to 11 billion so far, and that's between the SARS recoveries and the SIU's recoveries and the asset forfeiture unit recoveries. And we can go into more detail on exactly. Yeah. So Chairperson, and then there were two other points. The one, and this one is an important one, and we're not pointing fingers because Presidency must put it in place. The question that was asked about the work in synergy with National Treasury to get the job done. So it's well known that government in many departments, and the Presidency is no exception, has got areas of our administration that is under-resourced. So at the moment, the fight back against corruption and all of this work needs we need to put our secretariat on steroids. We need to beef it up. But you can't hire people without budget. Now that needle has shifted, Chairperson. National Treasury has heard our call to establish the head of the public administration hopper, including the anti-corruption work. So that is busy being put in, and in fact, in the current financial year, some additional resources are on budget to have a proper secretariat operating not out of any old office, but out of the office of the Director General in the Presidency, so that that coordination interdepartmentally is more effective, and so that our secretariat can get a portfolio of evidence of tangible progress from the line departments and the other agencies. And then the last comment, Chairperson, is a big one. From Member Skosana, specifically about local government. When you have irregular expenditure, when you have negative findings from the Auditor General, and then what? Again, because of the fact that local government and the different spheres of government, they are different spheres of government. Presidency does not run a local government, but Presidency has to intervene when we have crises. And I think the committee has seen the intervention both initially in eThekwini, but more recently in Johannesburg. It again can't be done with no capacity. So we have made an internal decision to shift some of our resourcing Presidency from where it was being used across to the support on the local government program. That decision has been made, it's been signed off, and our PMO unit are running with it. And we hope that even though it's not sustainable to keep on stepping in when local government fails, at least if we have some wins, it will start to shift. So, Chair, those are the 5 areas I wanted to emphasize. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Advocate Matibi. I noted you, note you, Honorable Skosan. Please go ahead, Advocate Matibi.
No, thank you, Chair. There's some responses that we wanted to respond to. The international relations, and thanks for that question, Honorable Neil May. We are seeing serious traction in the international relations space, of course guided by DERCO. We are seeing good cooperation with Interpol amongst all of us. We, as SIU, we actually have MOU with Interpol. We know that the South African Police Service, there was an Interpol conference here in Cape Town recently. In particular, really around enforcement of mutual legal assistance. We have seen an improvement there. The latest example we can cite is that as a result of the mutual legal assistance request, we have seen some of the raids that were done in India. So we are really pleased that continually we are seeing an improvement around requests for mutual legal assistance being acted upon. Our chairship of the G20 Anti-Corruption Working Group now even goes further, over and above the chair of the African associations and international associations. We're really seeing traction. Honorable Chair and my colleague Advocate Vanara can come in. We are dealing really with, as the committee correctly captured it, a systemic issue here. And one of the issues really is that the recommendations of SIU are not binding. And that's why we've got this mechanism. Where there is no legally binding recommendations, this mechanism should give us the results. Right? Where departments are not acting on blacklisting, treasurer not blacklisting, we need to zoom in and find out why is it that they're not acting and take action. On the disciplinary side, and I'm glad Honorable Mente is back. We had an example because really, as a system, even in the current system, we should really not allow the exercise of discretion to be irrational. Where state institutions, municipal, said to my colleagues, particularly at SIU, that we shouldn't just stand back. We really shouldn't just accept that. We should ask for the records of the decision, because we would have been satisfied that there's a case to be made when we made this referral. So then they come back and say, we've decided not to take action. No. And there's one case in one of the municipalities where they've given us this answer and then we've said no. We want to see the records of your consideration of the matter and how is it that you have reached the decision not to act. That? They couldn't provide us that. So which really indicates that there's an opportunity for irrational decisions in this space. And we should really guard against that and monitor those. With regard to the binding nature of SIU recommendations, and that really has been acknowledged, and we are really pleased that part of the NACEC recommendations is to make the recommendations of the new entity that will be considered after the processes are followed, for those recommendations to be binding. But we are not going to wait until then. The SIU Amendments Act that we have started a while back and we are processing through Department of Justice, and this is where Advocate Vanara can come in. Part of the amendments, which can go through, probably even before the legislation on NACEC recommendations comes up, part of the SIU Amendment Act is to really make the SIU recommendations to be binding, because we've observed that this is a systemic issue that causes issues. But as I say, even before the legislative provisions to make recommendations binding, this mechanism, administrative mechanism, executive mechanism, should assist us to hold the state institutions to account where they are not implementing. Advocate Vanara, do you want to just appraise the committee the content of the amendments and probably where they are in the process? Thank you.
Good afternoon, Chair, honorable members. As Advocate Matibi has correctly articulated where really the challenge lies, we have proposed legislative amendments to make the findings binding. The binding nature of the findings would of necessity compel an institution that disagrees with that finding, not just to sit, but they'll have to go to a court of law to then have that binding finding set aside. If not, we will then be able to enforce that finding to ensure that there is an execution of the finding. A factor that would be over and above the measures that the presidency would have spoken to this morning. The legislation itself is still with in August. I know they are finalizing it for the minister so that the matter could be taken to cabinet. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Honourable Chair.
All right, thanks very much. Did you have a question that was missed, Honourable Skosana, because we've got just 2 minutes?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chair. I won't waste your time because the COO invoked the issue of the state capture report and the issue of the local government, which I said himself, that's what he said, that they are monitoring. I'm not saying the presidency, are the people who are supposed to be dealing with local government. As I said, I know exactly the separation of power. But in the same token, COO, I understand that people are yeah.
Introduce fines. We're going to introduce fines here for that sort of.
Yeah, people sometimes like this political statement, Chair, to say they are recovering money, they are doing that on the State Capture Commission. Zondo himself, who was sitting there as the Chief Justice, chairing that committee of the State Capture. This Dutch Roman law, for us, it must change completely because the system is the problem in this country. I'm saying to you, the president appointed people in the cabinet, in the executive, as we speak here. When the chairperson of the State Capture Commission pointed fingers at them, they are sitting in the executive. So let's not go there. Let's not go there. Once we go there, we're going to poke holes in that report, which is reviewable, which is not binding anyway. As we have seen, people are sitting there in the cabinet who were red flagged, same as these companies which are not blacklisted. Only one. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you so much, Honourable Skosana. So I want to make closing remarks. So I'll give you just a few minutes to close so that I can make closing remarks and also set out what happens next. So if we can do that expeditiously.
The problem is that Honourable Skosana is leaving the room. He must come back, Chairperson, because you see the president has explained his appointments, and unfortunately, I earlier on elected not to venture into this comment. It's repeated again about the president appointing people who are in the State Capture Commission. The president has clarified himself, not once, but twice in Parliament about the rationality of the appointment of some people who have been there. And we've often asked ourselves, who amongst these cabinet ministers and deputy ministers has been charged? So that we are then able to say, but why are you appointing people who are facing allegations in the courts? And so we will, I think we will at an appropriate time, Honourable Skosana, ventilate on this issue. But I think it needs a little bit of time so that there's better context to it. But I don't think that it's a matter that really, Chairperson, would not require us to respond. We will at an appropriate time have to have a conversation of this nature. But as I said, the President has clarified himself, not on one occasion, on more than one occasion, about the rationality of the appointment of members of the cabinet who may have been spoken about in the Zondo Commission.
Thanks very much, Honourable Deputy Minister. So let me close in this way. So, sorry, your mic is still on. I don't want you to be heard when you are swearing there quietly, using unparliamentary language. You'll get reported. Thank you very much. Look, let me close in this way. I don't see this conversation as us versus you. Us as Parliament. the committee versus the executive or the presidency in particular. I think all of us and realize that South Africans are angry and they are impatient, and that what they want to see is action that produces outcomes. All of us have to explain that we don't have 3 levels of government, we've got 3 spheres of government. And so, you know, a minister cannot go to a council and issue an instruction and then the council must do it. We've got those difficulties in our system. That is very well recognized. But the complaint that South Africans have, and I think members of the committee are advancing, is also that government has long explanations and very delayed and short actions. That is the complaint of the South African people. All of us have a responsibility to respond to that frustration because it undermines the credibility of our democratic system. People look at us and say, all of you are useless. The presidency was there, it didn't fire anybody. So we get into trouble for not firing you today. So all of us feel the back firing you today. So all of us feel the back firing you today. So all of us feel the back. I also want to say that I don't think any of us are asking the president to act outside of his powers. C says the president promotes the unity of the nation and that which will advance the republic. More than half of the things the president asks to be done, and I used to be a private citizen, I worked in the private sector. If the president wanted a meeting on Thursday, everybody drops what they're doing and they show up. Because the president has said, come now, if anybody can come, there is no statutory consequence, but people are willing to submit themselves to be convened by the president, to be given direction on national priorities. And they can work out how much they can contribute towards that goal. There is nothing, I believe, stopping the president and the presidency from doing that sort of thing in the public sector and using the power of the office, the authority, the implied authority of the office, to say, I want a meeting with Salga and all mayors. And I'm asking that we do X by the 30th of November, and the Treasury here will give 15 people to work with you to get this done. I think that's what South Africans are asking for. And my frustration and Honorable Beasley's anger and the frustration of the members is that what we hear is bureaucratic process. And these things take time, Honorable DM, to pull together. But at the same time, the response that South Africans want is urgency. And all of us are in trouble with South Africans because they say you sit at Scopa and we don't see any outcome. All the members take a backlash, just like you do. So I'm just asking that we don't see this as us and them. We really are all in this together. But urgency really needs to be the currency that all of us work with so that South Africans don't give up hope in the value of democracy itself. We will, as next steps, so we will ask the Department of Public Service and Administration. So if I understand you correctly, you've said right now, if anybody is to be appointed as an accounting officer in national government in particular, if I'm wrong in saying provincial government, the vetting is completed before they are appointed. There is, however, a historical issue with people that are already in position that had not been vetted, and therefore that backlog needs to be cleared. And that's the accountability we will now urgently ask for from the Department of Public Service Administration. I just want to implore, Honorable Deputy Minister, in that vein, given that there is a finite number of people that need to be vetted, we really, in response to the need for agency, if the government, and the government contracts all the time, if there are entities that can be approved in terms of the clearances that are required, to get this done as quickly as possible. I think South Africans will be very happy to hear that. They won't complain. It will be money well spent, I believe. And if you do that and someone is complaining, you can come to the committee and say, you asked us to do this and now people are unhappy. We will have to fight on your behalf to get it done. So I'm just asking Honorable DM, can we please see some urgency? We'll talk to the Department of Public Service Administration. Two things I wish to convey on behalf of the committee. The medium-term budget policy statement is coming up. The accounting office of the presidency is here, fortunately. Can you please work with the DG and the presidency to make sure that two things are on the budget discussion? One is the compensation of the Auditor General by entities. We need to find an instrument in the budget that makes sure that the Auditor General is not owed money for so long, while they have carried on an obligation to audit the entities with their own resources or the resources that they have at their disposal. That there is a mechanism that is relates to the SIU. Same request. Can we please make sure the SIU, there is a mechanism that is found to make sure that is relates to the SIU? Same request. Can we please make sure the SIU, there is a mechanism that is found to make sure that if money has to move around from entities that are unwilling, that gets done, including the putting in place regulations which get around the unauthorized expenditure issue, because typically the fees that have to be paid to the SIU were not in the APPs because they didn't know that there was going to be a proclamation. So usually there is this back and forth between the entities. Can we please ask that this be placed on the agenda as well so that these two institutions. The third one, it was also here in committee. I know I had said two, clearly I can't count. The third and last one relates to the capacity. This is also a budget conversation. The capacity of the Hawks to investigate commercial crimes and to have access to sufficient digital investigative skills. So I asked the Hawks, they were sitting there, they were trying to not be very frank with it, but I asked how many chartered accountants they have in their ranks. Advocate Motibi smiling because he was here nationally, and I think they had less than 5. There were 2. The number was 2. One of the things we have to resolve, and this is another policy issue, we said we deal with systemic issues here. The salary scales for specialized skills, it's not just an NPA problem. If the Hawks cannot investigate complex commercial crimes because they can't afford people, can a mechanism be found? And in our next conversation, we really would like to hear what the moves are. I know there's a solution that's been found in the context of the NPA to give them access to a certain level of external skills and so on. Can we please do the same for the Hawks? Something similar. And I know you don't issue an instruction and it must be done. But again, the committee is committed to helping solutions. So if there is any way you need our support in relation to getting things like that over the line, please, you can approach the committee as well. Because we're also trying to respond to this frustration that South Africans are talking about. So let me leave it there. I just wish to thank the members. Sorry about the traffic this morning. If there was a way I would have solved it, I would have. Thank you to you, DM, and to your colleagues from the presidency, from the chief in